But we're now going to move on to the second presentation of session 4. And our presenters for this one are Ben Yeager and Amanda Goodhue. Ben grew up in northern British Columbia. After attending the Mountain Adventure Skills Training Program in Fernie, he was instantly hooked on the mountain lifestyle. Ben started working as a professional ski patroller at Castle Mountain Resort in 2018 and is returning this season for his 4th season. In the summer, you can find Ben riding his mountain bike all over Western Canada. Amanda Goodhue has been a patroller at Castle Mountain Resort in Southern Alberta for the last 9 seasons. She's a professional member of the Canadian Avalanche Association and works as part of the avalanche forecasting team at Castle Mountain Resort. Prior to working at Castle, Amanda spent a year in Fernie taking the Mountain Adventure Skills Training Program, which initially got her interested in ski patrolling and the avalanche industry. And I have a personal request for all of you out there who are waffling about making an ISW presentation anytime in the future. Perhaps you think the presentations are for researchers or engineers or practitioners who are about to retire. Well, think again. Amanda and Ben are examples of what international snow science conferences need more of. Case studies are often the highlight of conferences like this. Ben and Amanda are going to present a remarkable case study. So over to you, Amanda and Ben.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having us. Can you see and hear us here?
We can hear you, Ben. You're still in work mode there. You just need to hit the play or proceed.
We get Brent to share.
Yeah, I'm gonna just grab it back and send it back to you guys.
Yeah, maybe retry that. We're just not having the same results we had earlier there.
Yeah, no problem. Just 1 second.
Let's try putting it into present mode.
Coming at you guys now.
So this one.
Move this.
Looks like it's still in work mode there, guys. Work
There we go.
There.
Awesome.
Golden.
Cool. Right on. Well, thanks everybody for having us on today and tuning in. We're here today in Crow's Nest Pass, just a short drive down from Fernie, enjoying some nice fall weather. Today we'll be exploring an avalanche feature located at Castle Mountain Resort called Red Chair Drift. We'll begin with an introduction of Red Chair Drift to highlight the unique characteristics and challenges involved with it. Following that, I'll pass it off to Amanda, who will take over and share a case study of an incident that occurred in February of 2019. The Castle Mountain Resort is located on the eastern slopes of the Rocky Mountains in southwest Alberta, approximately a 2.5-hour drive south of Calgary. We experience a fairly typical continental snowpack and climate, and Castle is well known for windy weather conditions with alpine winds commonly reaching strong to extreme speeds. There are 2 chairlifts used to access the main mountain terrain. Skiers ride the blue chair, followed by a short traverse over to the red chair, which will take them to the top of the mountain at just above 2,200 meters. Red chair is used to access all of the alpine terrain on the mountain. The avalanche feature highlighted in this presentation, Red Chair Drift, is located somewhat inconveniently for us, directly above the unload of the red chair. Here's another look at the terrain on the mountain. This is our more southerly terrain known as the Chutes. This steep alpine and fall line terrain is what Castle is well known for and is only accessible by use of the red chair. The red chair was first installed in 1998 where no lift previously existed. Red Chair Drift sits at 2,250 meters on the southeast aspect. The track is 95 meters long with a fairly uniform 35-degree slope angle. There is 10 meters of flat between the base of the slope and the lift unload. This feature produces up to size 2 avalanches with regular control work. This photo is likely taken after a snowfall of light winds. The arrow indicates an area that is normally a large rock patch. Redshare drift sits along the ridgeline, lead to the predominantly westerly winds. Rapid loading occurs under moderate to strong winds, while extreme winds tend to scour the feature. Wind and storm slabs are the most common avalanche problem that we deal with in redshare drift. This photo is showing the extreme difference of windward versus lee slopes after an extreme wind event. We're looking up here at the start zone, which is located in the top left of this photo. This is the same ridge used by patrollers to access redshare drift for avalanche control via a short boot pack from the unload of the redshare. So what is it exactly is exposed to the hazard of redshare drift? There's infrastructure with the redshare itself, a lift operator hut and diverter, as well as a ski patrol hut. There's the staff, including the lift operators, patrollers, maintenance workers, and snowcat operators. And of course, there's always the skiing public. The unload area is regularly hit by avalanche debris during control work. It can be as small as a light dusting or as large as requiring a snowcat to remove snow of the bull wheel, as seen here in this picture. The flat area and the cat cut created at the lift unload also act as a terrain trap, where even small avalanches can create deep debris piles. In 2006, this explosive controlled avalanche occurred that knocked the lift operator hut off of the mountain. And in 2010, a diverter was built by members of the mountain safety team and installed to help reduce the vulnerability of the hut. After construction of the diverter was completed, it was finished by filling the structure with rock. The diverter has proven to be a very effective tool for added protection to the lift operator hut. This picture is showing a great example of a size 2 explosive controlled avalanche hitting the unload area. The diverter does its job well and allows the debris to flow around it. Also pictured is the ski patrol hut. The patrol hut is the least commonly affected of all the structures from avalanches off redshare drift. So what sort of strategies do we have to use to mitigate up there? Explosives and ski cutting are the primary methods used to control redshare drift. Fortunately, the feature is very easily accessible by control teams using a quick and safe travel route up the ridge, even in adverse weather conditions. These techniques are used in the morning to protect the public for the upcoming ski day, as well as in the afternoon to protect snowcats working in the area that evening. A strategy that has begun to be used in recent years is building cat roads across the feature to break up the size of the slope. Building these cat roads requires a skilled cat operator, time spent working on the roads, and good communication between the grooming and patrol departments. These roads are difficult to put in when snow levels are lower early season, but once they are established and maintained regularly, they've proven to be an effective mitigation strategy. Finally, we always have the option of closing the lift if we feel the hazard is building too quickly and control work needs to be done during operational hours. Here's an example of terracing and cat roads. This photo shows 3 roads built across the top of the feature and has a large amount of snow removed on the lower part of the slope. The terracing doesn't always look like this on this feature and varies with snow amounts throughout the winter, but this shows an ideal setup. Redshare drift is undoubtedly a unique avalanche feature that presents its own distinct challenges. The key ones being the proximity of the slope to the unload of the lift and the terrain trap that is consequently created by that, the rapid wind loading that can dramatically change conditions, often in times of poor visibility that make it challenging to see the feature, and the difficult decision-making required when determining to close the lift during operating hours. As mentioned earlier, the redshare is used to access all of the alpine terrain on the mountain, which is a considerable amount of terrain to have to close to deal with the hazard in a single feature. There are a lot more external pressures involved in this decision compared to determining when to close sections of terrain that are accessed by gates, which allows for redshare to continue operating. Awesome. So now I'll pass you guys off to Amanda Goodhue, who's going to take us through a case study of an incident that occurred up there in February of 2019.
Awesome. So we'll now look at a case study for an avalanche incident that occurred involving the redshare drift feature. The avalanche resulted in 1 burial and recovery. Throughout the case study, I'll focus on the rescue portion of the event as well as how it sort of relates to some of the challenges of red share drift. So to give some context to the day of the event, I was the lead forecaster for the day and was relatively new to this role. More senior forecasters were away on other commitments, so it was an overall less experienced crew working on this day. Looking at some weather and snow conditions leading up to the event, the 12th and 13th, we had a storm with 44 centimeters of snow and generally light winds. And then the 14th, we saw no change and continued light winds with no control work done on the mountain that day. The 15th, we had 8 centimeters of snow overnight with light winds, and it was no longer snowing at the beginning of our operational day. So the morning of the 15th, assessment of red share drift determined that old ski cuts were still visible, as well as a cat cut going across most of the feature, so no further control work was needed. Once the lifts opened up on the day of the 15th, moderate to strong southwest winds started up, and the avalanche incident in this case study occurred at about 10:30 that morning. So to look at the avalanche incident itself, a patroller in the top hut, which you can see pictured in that photo, noticed someone sidestepping up the bottom of the slope, which triggered an avalanche above them. And that's sort of reflected in that photo in the lower first pocket, if you can read that. A small pocket of snow was initially triggered that knocked them to the ground, and this sympathetically triggered a larger avalanche up higher on the feature. So the patroller in the top hut actually witnessed the event and lost sight of the person after the first small pocket of snow came down. And the avalanches were a size 1 and a 1.5, and the terrain trap effect of the cat cut caused a deeper debris pile than there would otherwise have been. So looking at our initial response in terms of mobilization, the incident was called in immediately and basic ICS roles were established. Red Share stopped unloading public, and the 2 patrollers who were at the top hut immediately started an AVSAR response. So 2 more patrollers and a Carta-Dog team were also mobilized from the base area on snowmobiles within a couple of minutes of the event occurring. And 4 patrollers were actually on Red Share when the event happened, which was no longer spinning. So our initial response on scene, a group of students from a local ski school and their instructors were the ones that made up the majority of people in the unload area. Instructors very quickly determined that 1 student was missing out of their groups, and 2 students were partially buried, and they were quickly assessed by a patroller and then helped out of the debris by bystanders. A reco search was initiated immediately, but it was found that there was too much interference from the lift and also from nearby buildings to effectively search the debris. So from there, it was decided that a probe line was the best search tool to move to for the situation. So a probe line and recovery, the debris pile was about 10 meters by 20 meters that was being searched. The probe line was made up of students and instructors, with students being aged 9 to 16. A probe line was led by patrollers, and there were enough people to cover the width of the debris pile as they were searching. Probes were located on the outside of the patrol hut, right where the avalanche occurred. So equipment needed was already on site. Within a few minutes of searching, a student got a probe strike, which was then confirmed by a patroller to be 80 centimeters deep. The student was dug out by patrollers and recovered within 5 minutes of the burial time. They were conscious, breathing, and had no injuries. So after the recovery, in terms of continuing to search the debris, the probe line was continued as soon as possible, and about a pass and a half were done on the debris pile when more patrollers and a carted dog team arrived on scene. In total, 3 passes were done with the probe line, and a carted dog team searched the debris with no other burials found. So in this incident, what contributed to a fast and successful rescue? Everyone at the unload area was part of the school group with coaches, and so it was quick to establish that there was one person missing. The event was also witnessed by patrollers, so response time was fast and all equipment needed was already on site at the patrol hut. AFSAR skills training and regular practice for patrollers helped manage the scene and effectively assess and use all tools and strategies available. This made managing the stress and the number of people on scene easier. And then a probe line with clear direction. So students aged 9 to 16 with no avalanche training were able to follow directions and use slalom probing techniques effectively. The patroller leading the probe line was stopping about every minute or so for a quick reset and to remind everyone in the probe line what they were looking and feeling for with every probe strike. So taking that time kept things effective and organized. Reminders like this one may have contributed to the fact that it was actually a student in the group that got the initial probe strike and was able to recognize that they had actually hit something. So events like this one always have us asking ourselves what we missed and what we can learn from it. A few things in particular stand out for us. So when winds suddenly increased, we had the perfect conditions for loading this feature. Previous low density snow had fallen with light winds, so there was a lot of snow to be redistributed. With this first wind event following those storms, that was sort of what started happening that morning. On this day, there was a overall less experienced forecast team than usual. So we recognized that redshirt drift was loading and that it would need control work if winds continued, but we underestimated how quickly the hazard was actually building. Seeing the Cat Road and previous ski tracks in the morning may have given us too much confidence in the Cat Road actually being effective, as it didn't go across the entire feature. This avalanche occurred on the side of the feature that doesn't commonly load as rapidly, and the Cat Cut didn't actually cross onto that side of the feature at that point. We can also look at the difference in building hazard between ski terrain and overhead features. So snow was well compacted after the storm within the resort, but conditions were different in overhead terrain where it hadn't been skied. So events like this also make us ask ourselves what we can do better to manage redshirt drift. It'll always be a challenging feature with it being right above the unload of the lift. and our mitigation techniques for it are always evolving. So since this event, improvements have been made in the consistency of cat roads and terracing on red share drift. The implementation of a daily meeting with grooming staff has helped with this, and has improved overall communications between the two departments. We're also more aware of the fact that the cat roads may give us too much confidence in their effectiveness, especially if they're not present across the entire feature. No climbing signage was present at the unload area when this incident happened, but we've since added signage asking people to move away from the unload. This incident shows the importance not only having signage, but also enforcing it consistently in the unload area. Having a greater awareness of how human factors and operational pressures affect our decision making is also important. Midday closures for red share may need to happen more frequently to manage building hazard in situations like this one. So in conclusion, having an avalanche path such as red share drift directly above the unload area at the top of the mountain will always present forecasting challenges for us. Over the years, we've continued to learn more about the most effective ways to manage the feature, but it'll always be an ongoing process of learning. Now I think we'll open up to questions, and also a huge thanks to everyone who contributed to discussions and information to put this presentation together. Couldn't have done it without all of you guys.
Okay, thanks, Amanda and Ben. That was excellent. That was, yeah, I really hope we get more presentations like that. I'm just fussing with my webcam here. Okay, well, while I'm hoping my webcam kicks in there, you can raise your hand to ask a live question, or you can type into the chat box. Are there any live questions? Okay, there's no live questions. How about the chat box? We have one, so go ahead, Olivia. Please read the question from the chat box.
Yeah, hi. So we have a couple questions about barriers. So a few people have asked, do you consider putting up snow barriers or building like a snow terrace with cats? They're said to be an effective mitigation technique. Are there any thoughts or plans to build a fence or a barrier or anything like that?
Yeah, figured a question like this would come up for sure. So it's something that's definitely been explored over the years. And I definitely don't have a great answer for it. I think it's something that needs, basically needs more assessment and more studying. I think it has potential to be a strategy that may work in some ways. But yeah, it's been explored and sort of always one of our ideas to look into for sure.
Okay, thanks. Are there any more? Yes, Olivia has another question.
Yeah, there's a couple more questions coming through the chat box. Mark just wants to ask, did you come across any difficulties using slalom probing with untrained bystanders? The last ICAR recommendations mentioned that it may be more difficult with untrained users versus other probe line techniques, and I'm wondering if this was your experience.
Totally, yeah, I think that's a good question. I actually wasn't one of the ones on scene running the probe line, but in talking to the ones that were on scene, they actually had pretty good luck with using the slalom probing technique. which I think is actually a pretty interesting rescue component to this incident. I think especially sort of taking time to keep things really organized and having really clear directions seem to be a key component to that, and sort of taking time to do a reset every so often and making sure everyone is sort of on the same track. They seem to have pretty good success running a probe line with untrained people using the slalom probing technique in this situation.
Great. Yeah, I think that should answer it. I just have one more question for you. I'm going to lump a few questions into one. These ones are more about the snowpack. How deep was the fracture line, and did the slide involve only the recent snow, or did it break deeper and take out the partial cat track?
Yeah, so with sort of the nature of the weather that day with limited visibility and a lot of snow moving around, by the time we got up to actually look at the crown line, it was hard to get a perfect sort of picture of what that looked like because so much more snow had been transported around. We estimated that it was about 10 to 30 centimeters deep and suspect that it was just the most recent storm snow and wind transported snow being moved around. So nothing deeper than the recent storm snow.
Okay. Thank you very much, Amanda and Ben. Those were great answers and just a super presentation. It's